Nick Fuentes rips apart Ben Shapiro, simply annihilating him after his appearance on TRIGGERnometry interview. On those remarks that landed with young Americans face real economic pressure. Now, Nick Fuentes did interpret, Shapiro's message to get on the bus as a sign of disconnect between political elites and everyday people. Also, Nick Fuentes ties those views to the broader, GOP values and the growing divide between the establishment voices and those who are part of the populists as well as MAGA. Now, Nick, Ben Shapiro is presented as a part of a conservative class that avoids the economic realities most Americans deal with daily, and Nick Fuentes simply has to explain all the contradictions about, the things that Ben Shapiro as well as others will stand for. So here we have Nick Fuentes absolutely annihilating Ben Shapiro. Excuse me. Let's go ahead and get right into it.
According to Jewish law, you are Jewish if your mother is Jewish, and this goes all the way back to Adam and Eve, they believe. Goes right to the beginning. They believe in blood and soil nationalism in Israel. In order to secure citizenship, all you have to do is prove you're ethnically Jewish on a DNA test. It's called birthright. It's your birthright to live there. And so for Israel, they're blood and soil nationalists. They're fascists. Ben Shapiro says, all the Arab Muslims need to be picked up and kicked out of Israel because this needs to be a Jewish country for Jews. It has to be here. It has to be ethnically Jewish people living here. The state has to be Jewish. It's a Jewish nation. They're Jewish nationalists. God promised them that. But then those Jewish people come here. Ben Shapiro's ancestors come from Russia. Those people come here. And for America, they say, well, this place is for everybody. You're not promised anything. This place is not for Europeans. It's not for your ancestors. Maybe you have ancestors going back to the Mayflower or Jamestown. Maybe you have ancestors going back to the Revolution. That doesn't matter. You are owed nothing. You are not promised anything. Not the land. It's not yours. America's identity doesn't have to be European or Christian. No, see, all you're promised in America is the adventure of a lifetime, which means what exactly? The free market? So if you're hungry, if you don't have health care, if you're homeless, if you're a veteran, if you're disabled, if you're a struggling mother, if you're adopted, whatever your problem is, well, you're not owed anything. You're not promised anything, and America won't take care of you. Because America isn't a community. It's not even really a nation. America's just a big jurisdiction where we all agree on the value of the US dollar. Because what does a community have? A community has an identity. A community is coherent. There's a sense of family, familiarity. There is actually a sense of shared heritage, culture, religion, values. So let's get this straight. In Israel, they have free health care. In Israel, they're promised the land. Who? The Jews. Who is promised refuge and a home and opportunity and healthcare and security and prosperity and defense and a way of life and community? Jews are. They're promised a real nation. But Jews come to America and they say America isn't a nation. America isn't a community. It has no shared values, religion, identity, culture, anything. And you're not owed anything and you're not promised anything. If you can't afford a house, well, hey man, buy a train ticket. Like a bum. Buy a train ticket or a bus ticket like a tramp. Because the government won't look out for you. The community won't look out for you. There isn't a community. This is just a place where we buy and sell. This is just some marketplace. That's the problem that people have. Blood and soil for me, open borders for thee. Blood and soil, fascist, Jewish nationalism for Israel, but for America, refugees welcome. Open borders, right? The best and brightest. Multiracial, working class populism, colorblind meritocracy, whatever you want to say about it, that's what it's going to be for America. That's what's implied. And here's the kicker. Here's the best part. So maybe you could say that's a double standard, but it gets better. It's not just that Israel is going to be a community and a nation with blood and soil, and they get to do these things, and America doesn't. They have one set of values for Israel, another set of values for America. Here's the best part. They expect the American government to take care of Israel, but not Americans. So if a New York City, if someone who was born in New York City says, I want the government to help me, Ben Shapiro says, you're an ingrate, you're entitled. You're only entitled to opportunity. But when Israel's in trouble, they're entitled to help from the U.S. government.
And that right there is a massive problem because for years we've all heard of people who are, prominent conservatives saying that we must work hard to earn this and that and the third. Getting the promise of the American dream and stuff. But the fact of the matter is, what happened to the American dream that they talked about? They had people, come up and state that, I'm entitled to this, I'm entitled to that. But they're doing this behind the scenes, of course. What I mean by that is they'll say that, we must work for the American dream and stuff. But at the same time, they're getting all the kickbacks. I'm talking about the elites and stuff in the establishment too. They don't care. They just use the working people and everything. They do the same thing that the Democrats do and everything. Come out every 4 years and stuff. Just go ahead whenever it's election time to go ahead and get their votes. But at the same time, they're not going ahead and giving them that particular, things that they need. It wasn't until, Trump became president again and started doing these things to help those out. That's what made him win over everybody. Okay. And the fact of the matter is that, Fuentes is definitely right in this particular aspect. Got to pay attention to the needs of America first and stuff instead of sending out money to other countries, including the favorite country of Ben Shapiro. All right. And the fact of the matter is that we still have our own problems at home, crazy debt, inflation that's, just now being, dealt with and everything. Unemployment as another issue. The government's recently reopened and stuff. And the fact of the matter is that we can't pay attention to the problems of other nations and stuff when we got to take care of the needs and interests of the everyday working Americans, the people who's already been ignored for far too long.
If you're an American and you say, I want the government to help me, you're an ingrate, you're a spoiled brat, you're entitled, you're a millennial. But when Israel's in trouble and says, I need the American government to help me, Ben Shapiro says, you better give them the missiles. You better give them the foreign aid or Israel's. That's the part that people really hate. The double standard is obvious. It's offensive. It's hypocritical. It's insulting. That's where people say, take your dual loyalty and go home. But to add to it, what makes it truly reprehensible, what makes it truly disgusting, they're not happy with the double standard. To add insult to injury, they want America to pay for their ethno-state. America will have no community. America will have no nationhood. America has no right to an identity, a sense of belonging, a sense of looking after one another. The government has this sort of role. It's not and Israel does. No, our government will also help them. So they have their nation and ours. God promised them the land. God promised them their ethno-state. And God promised them American aid. God promised them that America's going to pay for it. So Shapiro, with his Israeli wife, Israeli kids, his Israeli loyalties, he's got one set of standards for Israel and another for us. And at the same time is going to use his citizenship to lobby for welfare for Israel, but not for Americans. For Americans, he says, get lost, buy a bus ticket, get a job. For Israel, he says, think of the hostages, think of the Jews.
Just to make one thing clear, for those of you watching, Nick Fuentes is just simply revealing the hypocrisy between what Ben Shapiro has for Americans versus the land that he loves. Okay. It's not that, it's not about Nick Fuentes being an anti-Semite, because it shows that he's not. Okay. It's just that his words are actually being profoundly, are just profound to a lot of people right now who are actually been negatively affected, not only by the current, well, not the current, but the American government in general, but also by big figures like Ben Shapiro. Okay, now if you love or hate Shapiro, I mean, doesn't really matter. If you love Nick Fuentes or hate him, that doesn't matter either. Just pay attention to the message right now, because right now, Nick Fuentes is just simply laying out the fact that Ben Shapiro has different standards for America versus the land that he loves. Okay. It seems like, he is making the standards higher and stuff, but not even that. It's like the very things that he doesn't preach in America, he's preaching over in Israel. That's the thing. That's the problem that Nick Fuentes has with Ben Shapiro. Okay. He's just a hypocrite, letting, the people that he deems as good to be benefited better than the people that he probably deems like below him and everything to not be benefited and stuff, stating that, basically painting a narrative that Americans doesn't deserve to be helped, and the people who are over in the land that Ben Shapiro loves needs more help. Okay, so that's where Nick Fuentes is trying to drive home at, because it definitely isn't really fair.
How much do you have to actually hate a group of people to do this to them? Seriously. Josh Hammer, who used to work for Daily Wire, says Europeans have anti-Semitism in their DNA. Mark Levin said the same thing. How much do you have to hate a people to live among them, thinking they hate you, but going and telling them, we're your closest ally, you need us, you got all your ideas from us. You don't deserve anything. You're not entitled to anything, but you have to keep paying for our country. How much do you have to hate a people to do this? Josh Hammer lives in a white country. America comes from the Europeans. Those were the settlers, the founders, the framers. Josh Hammer lives here among white people, and yet he thinks white people hate him in his DNA. But yet he gained influence here. He married someone from Israel, and he uses his influence to browbeat us and tell us, you have no identity. You didn't invent anything. You're horrible people in your bones, but you have to give us all your money and fight our wars for us. Then you start to understand, why did these people get kicked out of 109 countries? Because of behavior like this. Because of behavior like this. It's not because people are jealous. It's not because of an irrational hatred. It's because I think at a certain point, all these different polities came to realize, wait a second, you don't see yourself as one of us. You're not advocating for what's best for all of us. As a matter of fact, you don't even like us. And actually, you seem to be taking advantage of us. And if that's the case, then we need to go our separate ways.
And that's exactly the point that Nick Fuentes is making here, because Nick Fuentes is just simply pointing out the problem. Americans, everyday Americans who are following these big figures like Ben Shapiro, are being taken advantage of and don't really see it. Okay, they're using like a big influence, they're following and everything. And the fact that they spoke here and spoken on that, they got their own shows, got their own companies and everything. They're using these particular platforms just to exploit us, and we don't even know it. That's the big problem right there that Nick Fuentes is just simply showing right now. Okay, and we can't tolerate that any longer. These people need to go ahead and be exposed for who they really are. And I'm not being anti-Semite and everything, but at the same time, I can call it what it is. I mean, think back to when back in the big BLM days and stuff, where black people said white people that if you don't want to talk, if you don't want to talk about this and stuff, you just racist and da 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 da. Well, this the same, and then you get that feeling and that anger and everything in you, saying that they're calling you racist because you want to talk about this, or they call you racist because you want to talk about that. But that's not racism at all. Same principle applies here. Exposing the very people who have a big presence and stuff, a big following and everything, and then the things that they preach and stuff and teach and everything. I mean, they're not really living up to that. Okay, they're hiding the fact that they want a certain people to be benefited. That was the same thing with BLM leaders, the same thing for certain Democratic leaders and stuff. Now we're seeing the same thing for many who are on the right and everything, who claim to be MAGA, but at the same time they're just taking advantage of the very people that they're trying to go ahead and get to be a part of, their following, their community and stuff. And Nick Fuentes is just simply revealing that particular part.
That's the story. Shapiro hates Americans. He sees Americans as useless eaters. And he can couch it any way he'd like. He can frame it any way he'd like. But look, if you're an American, I actually do believe that we have a community here. We have a nation. I disagree. You do have a right, at the minimum, to live where you grew up. You do have that right. New York City should be for the rich and for the poor. It should be for the rich and for the workers. It has to be. How could New York City exist without busboys? How could it exist without cab drivers? How could it exist without hotel workers? And where are those people going to live? They're going to go and live across the bridge. They're going to go live somewhere else. We're going to have Billionaire Island, Millionaire and Billionaire Island. What do those people even make? They're going to work in insurance, real estate, and finance. And all the slaves can go live in the slaves' quarters and commute on violent buses and violent public transit. It's insane. That's insane. Of course, the cities are where the jobs are. That's where the opportunity is. And yes, the cities should be made affordable for everybody. There should be affordable public transit. There should be affordable public services. Affordable housing. You are entitled to that. Just as the Jews feel entitled to live in Israel, New Yorkers are entitled to live in New York. Chicagoans are entitled to live in Chicago. Angelenos are entitled to live in LA. And yes, the government should take care of those people. Society should take care of its constituent members. We do not live in an open market. We live in a nation. We live in neighborhoods. We live in cities made up of people. When it should be based on shared heritage, shared identity, a shared sense of belonging, like we're all in it together. And the Jews understand that when it comes to Israel. They understand that when it comes to Brooklyn. They understand that when it comes to Surfside. But when Americans want to live in their own country, they say you're an ingrate. You're entitled. Get lost. What kind of rootless way of that is thinking? Well, what kind of rootless way of thinking is that? I guess the Jews in Israel should get lost. Seems like it's pretty expensive to set up a country in the Middle East that we're always having to defend it all the time. Why don't you get lost? You don't want to live in America because of anti-Semitism? Gee, maybe you should stop blaming the world and start blaming yourself. Stop blaming a system and start asking, what did you do wrong? Oh, you don't like living in America? Man, maybe you should go and live in Israel because, you know, the world's really about opportunity. We don't owe you anything. This is the part where people really see what's going on. And this is happening at the same time that they want to gatekeep the Republican Party. Ben Shapiro wants to claim the moral authority to gatekeep the GOP. And by the way, what is the GOP? It's the conservative party, the party that is tasked with conserving our nation, our people, our culture, our traditions, our heritage. Shapiro wants to gatekeep the conservative movement. He doesn't care about anything or anyone here. He doesn't want to conserve it. You don't like New York? Yeah, well, I don't know, go somewhere else. Oh, it's unaffordable? Yeah, well, you know, go work on an oil rig. You got to uproot and leave your community where your grandparents and great-grandparents lived, where your ancestors are buried. You've been there for 100 years? Yeah, I don't know, man. Get lost. Times are changing. This guy hates you, hates our country. He's not American in any meaningful sense of the word. And that's what people hate. Simultaneously, having no allegiance to this country, basically hating and having outright contempt for its people, but also claiming to be our moral betters and our gatekeepers and the right to lecture all of us all the time. That's the part that people really have a problem with. That's your Republican Party? Missiles for Israel, but if you can't afford a house, get lost? Yeah, well, good luck with that, Ben. Let's see how that does in 2028.
And that right there is why Gen Z is resonating highly with Nick Fuentes, because let's be honest here. Ben Shapiro, yes, he won over the ears of those who were from, you know, the previous generations, like baby boomers, perhaps even, well, maybe some in Gen X and stuff. But at the same time, I mean, Nick Fuentes, I mean, he has the youth actually resonated because of the fact of the matter is he's speaking on the very things that are affecting people who are part of Gen Z, as well as, well, even millennials. Okay. And he actually exposed how Ben Shapiro, how he really sees, you know, Americans and stuff versus the people from the land that he loves. All right. And the simple fact of the matter is that Nick Fuentes at least he's consistent and stuff. A lot of people would find the words that he says as problematic or whatever kind of words they want to use, but he definitely stood his stance and everything, and definitely exposed and annihilated Ben Shapiro with exposing the very things that Ben Shapiro truly believes and stuff. So this basically Nick Fuentes is just definitely winning in this particular point of the culture war. So let me know your thoughts about this in this discussion, this commentary from Nick Fuentes, and I see you on the next one.